Are we running?
We're, we're all good.
Okay, well, thank you, Lynn. Appreciate this opportunity to talk to you all tonight a little bit about some information about the Rays Hines perspective deal with the city. Let me just cover a couple of points in the introduction and then get right into the presentation, and then I'll answer questions. The first thing that you should know, and hopefully you'll still stay with the presentation after you hear this, but the first thing is that Carrie has got a night off tonight. She's got a neighborhood meeting that she will be attending, and so you're stuck with me is the bottom line. The second thing is I just want to acknowledge No Home Run, which continues to do a fantastic job providing information, and you can find that online at nohomerun.com and continue to read all of the information that's been compiled to date by Ron and many others. I want to thank the St. Pete public and the community for doing a great job of digesting this deal in a much more substantial manner over the last couple of weeks and finding out really truly what's behind the deal, which is not good. I will be addressing the non-stadium aspect of the deal, the public-private partnership for the development around the stadium. That's my expertise, and so I will stay focused on that tonight for the most part. And I just want to underscore that I am coming from this from one perspective, and that's from the perspective of an economic development professional. I was certified as a professional with IDEC, and I don't believe the city has a certified economic developer on their team right now, which I really wish they did, because I think it would have helped them when they sat down to negotiate this deal. So having said that, the first thing that I want to do is I want to take you inside the way the deal, in my opinion, should have been framed, how the city should have put the information together to start to have negotiations with the Rays. And I don't think they did this because I think that it's very obvious that the outcome speaks for itself, that if they had done even some of this approach, in my opinion, they would not have ended up with the terrible deal that is before the city now and the council. So let me take you kind of inside my world for 45 years. My expertise, quote unquote, was in public-private partnerships. That's what I did in 4 different cities. And I have a list of quite a few projects that I did over the course of my career, some of which I did in St. Pete. So where is the key information? Next slide. Okay, so I think many of you know that in my last presentation, I concluded that the fundamentals of the deal were all wrong, and I tried to be very diplomatic and nice about it and said that the public-private partnership was imbalanced, that it was imbalanced to the private sector and not to the city. And that's what I always look for is, okay, if the private sector is doing A, then the public sector maybe should do B. But in my opinion, the public sector is doing almost A through Z. They're leaving maybe a little, the Z is the vertical development. That's the only thing left for the developer. And I'm going to kind of get into that in greater detail. So the first thing that you look at is that before you enter discussions with a private developer, you gather certain information. so that it assists in your negotiations. And you want it to be as objective as possible. So when people say an open book negotiation, you're able to open your book and say, this is why I'm thinking this way. This is what makes me driven to believe in my position. And my sense is that the city didn't have the objective information before them to be able to do that, and therefore they totally got taken by a very astute group of people. I'm sure Wall Street driven. I used to work for the New York State Legislature, so I know that mentality, and I know that it's not easy to negotiate against that mentality. So you have to have your homework, and you've got to be able to dig in and stand behind your research. Okay, so this slide shows the research that I would have required going into the deal, and has not been discussed, at least in the council meetings, to my knowledge. What is the Rays' financial situation? I know there's a lot of speculation about it. When I was there, I read many reports about how much money the Rays were making on an annual basis. And the reports that I read had them somewhere between 50 and $100 million a year. It's probably way more than that now because of the TV contracts get renewed, et cetera. But it's substantial. So the fact that you don't have people in the stands like the rest of the baseball world doesn't mean that the team is not making money. And so that assumption I never bought. And I don't think the city should have bought it either. They should have done their homework and been able to say, okay, how much money are you making as an organization? And let's really talk about what that means in terms of a deal with the city putting its money in. The second modeling that I would have done, and that I think any professional certified economic developer would have at least recommended to the mayor and to the council, is I would have done a series of real estate pro formas on the non-stadium development. So I would have brought in professionals that have done financing of developments this large and run a pro forma on, okay, here's what we have to spend. Here's what we have to spend on the land. Here's what we have to spend on the infrastructure. Here's what it's going to take for vertical development. And, it's called a pro forma. The developer lays all that out. And here's the money that we're going to get back in rents and in sales. And when they run that pro forma, they want to show a return on investment, an IRR, that is as high as possible. So no city can put money into a deal, in my humble opinion, until they understand the parameters of that. How much money can they make on this deal? And then you start to look at, okay, if the city pays for all the infrastructure and you're able to take that cost, $142 million out of the developer pro forma, then what does that do to the IRR, the return on investment, right? Jacks it up. Then you take 174 million out of the land sale, and what does that do? And then all of a sudden, that return on investment looks like 50% to 100%, right? Because you just took two costs, substantial costs off the table. And then you say to yourself, okay, the city is required to put in grant money for all the affordable housing that's done. It's required in the deal. And that means that other developers are not going to get that money during the course of the next 10, 20, 30 years. They'll get it all. And half of that is at 120% AMI. How much sense does that make? Okay, but add that number in is my point. Oh, and then let's jump to the stadium side, and let's just say that the city gave up the rights to the naming rights and the city gave up all the rights to their fees. Build that into the pro forma. Why not? Okay, so now you've got what I would call imbalanced. Some people are going to have different words for that. They're going to be a little bit more dramatic in the description, but wow, is it imbalanced, right? But if they had done that homework, if they had run those numbers and got a professional in to run those numbers for them, they would have seen that they didn't have to do that. And now, why am I so definitive about that? Well, because I negotiated the Midtown deal, and Midtown was spending $93 million on the infrastructure. I know that. So they could afford it. I also know how strong the St. Pete market is. It's one of the strongest development markets in the country, thanks to all the work that the city has done, and the public has done over the years. And I know that you've got the real estate, the infrastructure, and the grants all coming in to make that number even better for Ray's Hines. And then, okay, so I would have looked at the return on investment. What is that? What is that return on investment that they make? Based on the level of public dollars. And there's a principle that we use in our business. It's called but for. The project would not happen but for the public investment. You have to get up and prove to your council, and I did this in 4 cities, you have to prove that you're not putting a penny more into a deal to make it happen. And the developer gets a fair return. That's okay. They should. If they're risking, there's very little risk, by the way, in this deal for the private sector. It's all in the public sector. But you want to put a fair amount of money in to make the deal go, give the developer the return that developer deserves on the risk that they're taking. And it should be a number that makes sense within those parameters. Now, the city is putting in about $315 million on the development side. That's the infrastructure and the land. That doesn't even include the grants that I've been talking about. About $315 million. And that all goes up front. Another principle that we have in my business is if the city puts $1 in, then the private sector has to put $1 in. It's 1 for 1. City doesn't front load all its money, put it all in up front, take all the risk out and hope for the best. And the development deal hopes for the best because there's no definitive language on developer performance. And that astounds me. I just cannot believe that was left as a wish that they deliver. There is no absolute requirements in that deal from my perspective on their side. Okay, the last piece here, and I will go a little faster now, is how have other cities framed development or stadium development deals? Well, before I left, I met with the president of the Atlanta Braves, and he told me how that was framed. And let me tell you that they were responsible for all the development costs. The Cobb County put money into the stadium, but nothing else. Everything around the stadium was the cost of the developer, the Atlanta Braves, as it should be. especially in a market like Atlanta. San Diego was the same thing. No money to the developer. The city didn't pay for infrastructure. They didn't give them free land. They had to pay market rate for the land, and there was no special grants. Next slide. Okay, so this is a continuation of how the deal should have been framed. Would have done a full review of other community benefit deals. I have never heard of a community benefits deal by a city that the city pays for. The purpose of community benefits is to have the developer pay for the community benefits. And the city is paying for all of them. 50 million comes out of the value of the land. And the city used that in one of their PowerPoints early on to show that. I would have done a full review of public-private partnership deals on the development side, not the stadium, in strong markets like Atlanta, San Diego, but I would have done more. I would have done 10 other deals, whether it was stadium or not stadium, just to show how they are structured, just to prove that if the city doesn't give all the money that the Rays want, it's within the market. Then I would have presented, number 7, I would have presented all of this backup information before I went to the table to the council. I would have framed all of this information to the council up front before I sat down with the Rays, so that the council understood the objective information, the market that exists out there for development in similar cities. And the findings from these studies would have supported the deal. Right now, you have a situation where the findings won't support the deal because the deal is so out of whack to the market. Next slide. Why was it not done, right? Why didn't they do the homework up front? Why didn't they frame the deal the way they did? I think maybe a lot of you know this already because you're, very astute about the politics, but if it was completed, St. Pete would have had a much different deal before them. I've made that point. So what does this tell us? That they didn't do it? I guess they came in with preconceptions. They knew what they wanted. At least the mayor did. And many of the council members, in my opinion. If it was done, and if they have this somewhere, then that information should be shared with the community immediately. And it would be impossible for the mayor and council to stand behind the deal that's before them, if that's the case. And the city preparation would have been, if the city did what I just laid out, the Rays would have had a heart attack, because it would have made their positions look ridiculous. There's no way. I mean, we're starting to see how the community is starting to understand how ridiculous this deal is. And sometimes you go too far. Sometimes a developer or the other party, thinks that they're doing such a great thing because they're getting everything they want, but then you have blowback from the community. And in the end, it's not a smart move. Next slide. Okay, now I have watched the committee meetings. I watched the last one, and I have been very disappointed, except for a couple of council members, at how weak the questions have been. I wish when I was there, the questions were this weak. I would have a lot less gray hair if that was the case. And I scratch my head because I can't believe that the community is really allowing some of the questions are just too weak in my opinion. And let me give you some examples here. And let me just check the time. Okay. Let me give you some examples. Are you saying that the Rays Hines can't afford to pay for the infrastructure? Why not? Show us the numbers, the pro forma. Why was Midtown paying 93 million and the Rays Hines zero? Please justify why the city is paying 142 million on infrastructure. I haven't heard that question asked by a council member. And I'm floored. It would have been asked when I was there. I know that. Now, again, I know some of the council members asked some brilliant questions, so don't get me wrong, but many of them are throwing softballs up there instead of really getting to the issues. Why did Mayor Welsh allow a special assessment? Are you not concerned about the impact of this on affordability? So, okay, this is incredible to me. So the city comes out with the deal and says, we're going to pay, we, the city, are going to pay 130 million for the infrastructure. And oh, by the way, the developer is going to pay 53 million if needed. And they put that in their column. And then later on in the agreement, it says, oh, we're going to move forward with the special assessment of the property owners on the Trop site to pay for Hines's share of the 53 million. Huh. Okay, so you're saying that they're spending 53 million, but they're really not. Oh, and by the way, let's reduce the property value by 53 million because Hines has to pay for infrastructure. Well, not with the special assessment, they won't. I mean, smoke and mirrors, smoke and mirrors. Why are Rays Hines receiving a 174 million discount on the land price? Show us the numbers that justify this huge value that is in addition to the 142 million infrastructure grant. And okay, so I said 315 million. I stand corrected. It was 316 million between the two. And just give me a second here to get caught up. Now, meanwhile, while the city is giving 316 million in value up front, the developer is not spending anything. Over 12 years, they have to pay for property. They don't even have to develop it until year 10. But in that 12-year period, they have to purchase, I think, $50 million ish worth of property, which is about half the property, but they don't have to develop it, and they can also parcel it out to other developers. And I have no idea how much income they're going to make doing that. Next slide. Okay, is Mayor Welsh saying that the Rays Hines cannot make the project work without a 316 million grant in one of the strongest development markets in the country? I've mentioned this before. Please explain this in great detail and provide the Rays Hines pro forma. So I said that I would have two objective third-party pro formas done by financial consultants in the development field. But meanwhile, I would require upfront the pro forma from Rays Hines, because I want to see what they're projecting, and I want to see how they're why are you saying to me, the city, that you need this money to make it work? Prove it, and I'll take it to the public and see what they say about it. Right? I haven't heard that question. I haven't heard anybody drill down on that information. That should be answered specifically by the mayor, by the way. What is Rays Hines' projected rate of return with the 316 million public investment up front? I can just tell you that rate of return is going to be huge. I don't even know. I mean, I can't even imagine. You know, you've got three major sources, as I've said in the past, in developments. You've got the land, you've got the infrastructure, and you've got the vertical development. The only thing that they're paying for is the vertical development. I would give up my retirement for that. And that's why the Rays want this so badly. They will do anything to keep it, in my opinion, because it's just the best deal they could ever get. Okay, why is the city paying for community benefits? Why did Mayor Welsh deduct 50 million from the land value for community benefits? The definition of community benefits is the developer pays for community benefits. That's the whole purpose of community benefits. Why did he deduct, this is unbelievable. Why did he deduct 64 million from the land value for green space? Now that green space is 10 acres. And they got a $64 million, they should be paying for all of the infrastructure because they'll be making more money on their rents. That's how it works. Why do you think developers do the landscaping that they do now and have the walking paths and everything? Because they get money back on that, big money. Why did Mayor Welsh deduct 53 million for the infrastructure, which I've already talked about? If these numbers are not correct, if they want to dispute this, then please explain why the land value was reduced by 174 million. If it's not for these items, if they've changed their mind, it's still 174 million. So please explain why the city is losing that value on the land sale up front and basically paying for all of the infrastructure so that the developer can get more money on rents. And let me just, I'll come back to this in a second, but can you believe that in the minimum development requirements, 3,000 plus units of market rate housing are included in those, in that minimum development? The city should not have included any of that. They're going to make a ton of money off of that, especially not paying for the land or having to pay for the infrastructure. It's market rate housing, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, next slide. With this huge unwarranted 316 million city taxpayer investment, why doesn't the city receive a return on its investment? The city gets nothing. Nothing from the development, nothing from the stadium. It's all profit. And that's why you've got to see the pro forma. How much money are they going to make on this? What happens when the team is sold? Does the city receive a return on its investment or just the Rays ownership? Just the Rays ownership. Now, a couple of years, I read a study of owners. Once the new stadium is built, then they sell the team and their return goes up dramatically. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's a huge percentage increase. And the city and the county is paying for half of the stadium, and they're not going to get anything back on that. And then they're paying upfront for the development, and they're not getting any revenue back on the development. It all goes to the developer. They win both ways. Why is the city guaranteeing grant money on all affordable housing units? We've talked about that on top of the 316 million. Next slide. Why does the city have to guarantee its spending up front and the Rays Hines have 30 years to deliver on their end, just in time for a new stadium? Now, the 30 years, it's pretty bad. They don't have to show any return on development until year 10, and that's 33% of the minimum development requirements. And then in year 20, they have to show another 33%. So that's 66%. Most of that, as I said, is market rate housing. That's not a problem for them. And then in year 30, believe it or not, they can extend it another 3 years. They can get another 3 years on top of the 30 years to deliver. You've got to be kidding me. With the city spending so much money at risk up front, why did Mayor Welch not guarantee a return on the taxpayer's investment with specific development performance requirements? Performance requirements are ridiculous. Even the 33% and the 66% in year 10 and 20, they can get out of that. They can get out of that because the next one explains that. There is a section in the development agreement called excusable development delays and then rejection of parcels. And the language of the excusable development delays I've never seen before. It is incomprehensible, that language. Basically, they can get out anything they want. The language is so broad. I mean, the city is going to have a mess trying to keep track of all this. And the developer is going to run circles around them because they've made the deal so complicated that you got all these other developers that can come in. No, hold Ray's Hines directly responsible for the development. Next slide. Why did Mayor Welch allow parcel development versus phase development? This is one of my greatest pet peeves, and this gets to performance from the developer. What they should have done is they should have said, okay, there are 4 phases, and you have to develop all of phase 1 and all of phase 2 while the stadium is being built. And they call it targeted development. The targeted development for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. I'll just throw that out. It means nothing. It's pie in the sky, wishful thinking. Everybody's running around saying this is a $4 billion development deal, and that's why the developer should get all this money. It's not. The minimum development is what matters. And then even the minimum development doesn't matter because there's so many excuses to get out of it that they basically can do whatever they want. But they'll get the stadium built in 4 years. You can bet on that because that's required. And the city has to do all the development over that period of time. All that 130 million has to be spent over the course of 4 or 5 years while the stadium is being built. But the non-stadium development is just, maybe we'll get to it. Hope to get, don't worry. We take it seriously. Put it in the agreement. Require a payback based on what the city wants and needs. Why only 10 acres of green space? I covered that already. Why is Mayor Welch allowing less than 600 affordable housing units on the Trop site? I almost fell off my chair when I read that language, that the mayor can single-handedly let them off the hook for the 600 affordable housing units on the Trop site, 500 of which is at 120 AMI. But that can all, the mayor could wake up one day and say, okay, do 5 of those units on site and the rest of them can go off site. Next slide. Okay, bringing this to a close. Why are the MWBE participation rates so low? You would think with all the money that City Hall is putting into this project that you would have a much higher rate than 10%. In that community in particular, and in the community, and with the mayor running around saying how important this was to him, how this deal can have 10% is beyond me. I know when I negotiated with Midtown, we had 20%. That was in the pre deal point stage or business deal points. We had 20% across the board for everything. not 10%, which is really the case here. Why is there no termination provision in the development agreement? So you got a developer that, if they want to not do the minimum development and the affordable housing, they can pay a little money to get out of the affordable housing, and they can just say, conditions have changed and we're not going to do the minimum development either. But you can't terminate my agreement with you. I can continue to do what I was doing on the parcels that I've already purchased. Really? And let me just mention, I don't know all of the, I have not been able to read the agreement in San Diego that Hines had or has, but I do know that they've stopped performing. And they've stopped performing because they say interest rates and the costs are too high. That's why you don't do parcel development. You do a phased development and you require it with or without changes in the economy. This is a big boy project, and Hines is a big boy. You follow through. If we're gonna follow through with the stadium, you follow through with the development. And then, of course, some of the council members said, who is this agreement with? They didn't know who it was with. The owner, Stu Steinberg, the principal owner, was in the agreement as an individual. So a lot of questions there. Okay, what happens if he sells the team? Is he still the owner of the development? Great question. Great question. Okay, so that is why I believe I'm so concerned about this deal for St. Pete. I really don't want St. Pete to become the next Miami and for the public to have to suffer that ridicule and this kind of deal for 30 years. And that's why I say that the deal is, all the fundamentals are wrong. I don't think it can be salvaged. I don't think that you can change this deal on the margins. It's so bad that you have to throw it away and go back to work on it. And I urge the council to vote no on this deal. The city is more important than baseball. And I do think that it has to start over. Now, Lynn, I will be glad, that was a lot, but I will be glad to answer any questions that anybody has and open it up for a discussion.
Sorry, I'm trying to global unmute everybody. But I'm going to give everybody permission to unmute themselves. So Peter, you've got it. There we go.
Okay.
I have a question actually, Al. Rebecca, let me just make sure I get you. There we go.
I'm
Okay,
working on the
got
answer to
everybody.
Rebecca's question.
Yes, I unfortunately got into a Facebook argument on one of the public sites about the agreement, and she accused the site of having all kinds of lies in it and not telling the truth and fudging the details. So I said, would you tell me something in the No Home Run site that you think is a lie? And she said, every place in there has a different number for the acreage that's going to be developed. She threw out a bunch of numbers. I don't remember, but I don't know where to look for that. Is there a rational reason? Like, here's the number that's going to be developed. Here's the number that's going to be open space. I mean, is there a logical reason why there would be different numbers for the acreage to be developed that is an easy explanation to her?
Yes. Is there an easy answer? No, but yes, there is an answer to this.
The answer.
So the original agreement, as presented by the developer in the city, routinely talked about an 87-acre site. It turns out that the surveyed acreage that is shown in the most recent agreement is greater than that, is 94.79 acres, almost 95 acres.
Uh-huh.
Out of that 95 acres, that's the boundary lines, the outer boundary lines of the parcel. Now, admittedly, out of that parcel during the development, and if you were a developer, you would buy the whole 95 acres. That's how a developer works. He buys the 95 acres, and then he takes out, the developer figures out where the roads is going to be, where the parks are going to be, where the streams are going to be, and all of that, and where the building lots are going to be. And then, so the developer might, on a 95-acre site, might net 50, 60 acres of buildable sites. And that's where it all comes back. That's the difficulty in doing the calculations. So every different layout consumes a different amount of road right-of-ways and a different amount of park layout. And of course, they are also taking the stadium out. They say the stadium, you can't take the stadium. Whatever acreage the stadium uses is the stadium acreage. And they always are subtracting out the stadium acreage. If you give it away for free, that's fine, but it's still acreage. It doesn't disappear. So I'll try to handle that in the message back to you. I'm working on that right now.
Okay, I took some notes. I don't know if we know on our site, on No Home Run site, if it is confusing about what acreage we're talking about being developed, because that person evidently either had talking points from the support groups or she had gone through and read it all. I don't know. I have not. But that's a good explanation and why there might be a varying number of acreage to be developed. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
And can I just mention one thing, because other people know this matter a little bit more than I do, but I just wanted to underscore that when I talk about the land value that the city is putting in at 174 million, I am very generously using their 2-year-old property value, their assessed value for that property. It's clearly a lot more than that. And I know that some people on this call have done a lot more digging than I have in terms of values. But I just wanted to mention that I'm being very, very nice and using their 2-year, it's still staggering what they've done. But I just wanted to point out that it's worse than the 174 million.
Alan, it's also, the appraisal was based on unimproved land with no infrastructure. And they're going to be putting 140 million in infrastructure into it. So just add that to the 279, you're already up to 420. And a new appraisal would be higher than that.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Great point.
Can I clarify that point? And that is that the 279, that the original appraisal, that was for land with utilities in it, to which we now have to add to it? Or if you were the developer, would you expect the 279 to have those lots to be utility ready or no utilities on the property?
Dick, I think it was raw land. I read it, I read the appraisal and it looked like 279 for raw acreage, for raw 76 acres. And
they were told specifically to do it as is raw acreage. There is electricity because they have lighting out on the parking lots. But, probably not adequate for what they want to build there.
It seems to me that that's where the lay person reading this and even the semi-professional gets into trouble, because we really don't understand I don't understand what a decent price per acre is, unimproved and improved. If we take their parcel approach and put in that infrastructure, now you've got utility-ready land, right? And we've done it, right? And it would be great to have an appraisal that says, here are your parcels, here are the uses, and here's your utilities are in, right? What's the appraisal per parcel or per acre?
Well,
Yeah.
we've got, Dick, we've got those. One of the sites that's been appraised recently is the old St. Petersburg Police Station, which is
station.
being sold. And that's coming out at $14.4 million an acre. And why?
Right.
Well, it's because it's a buildable site. It's got roads on all four sides. It's got water, sewer, power. All the utilities are already to the site. So that's a buildable site, and a buildable site is selling there for $14.4 million an acre, or appraised at that, and that's basically very near the center of the Tropicana field site, as close as you can
And-
get on the edge.
My
And
point,
Dick,
Peter, would be that if the council said, stop, we want a current appraisal, we'll take your parcels and your roads, and we'll be responsible for the infrastructure, and we'll deliver development-ready lots, right? That you take it from there. Let's get an appraisal for this property. Let's get the acreage down to the two decimal places. Let's get the roads in. Let's talk apples and apples for once.
Right.
and
Dick,
and
there's also remediation that would have to be for hazardous, there's contaminated land there. There was
And
a
some
cleaning, a
parcels
dry
need
cleaning
remediation
plant
and some don't.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure the ones they'll turn down are the ones that need remediation, because they can turn down specific parcels. So the city would end up having to remediate them, or you'd end up with a brownfield in the middle of a park. You know, I mean, they really have us.
Yeah, there are two approaches. We get another one that says, developer, the utilities are up to you. Here's the price per acre as is undeveloped. The second one is, you tell us what you want for plots. We'll give you an estimate to put that in and give you a price. We'll give you an appraisal per acre, utility ready. We're stuck in the middle, and nobody, and they will, since no argument is winnable, they win.
And Dick, let me just underscore a couple of points, because you're making some great points. One is that just keep in mind that Midtown, we had them at 93 million for infrastructure.
Right.
And we told them that we would not finalize the price of the land until we did an appraisal based on the deal. Okay. Based on the deal, which really, this is exactly what you're getting to, and is one of my pet peeves, one of many, is that they should do now that they've negotiated the deal, all the studies that they've done ahead of time are worthless. Your point exactly, you should do a new appraisal. The second thing is the economic impact analysis was based on their proposal. It was based on the $4 billion of development. And so that's absurd to include that. No, look at the agreement and what's real and what's not, and tell me what the value of that is. And then take into account all of the excusable delays and parcels that can be ignored in the development. You take the good stuff and not the bad stuff, right? You cherry pick, which is clearly going to be. So, I mean, I know that, a lot of folks are saying, look, please take a step back and really look at the facts and do your homework on this. And I think that's right. And that's what we're talking about here. But I just wanted to mention those points.
Just one final word, and that is that somewhere, somehow, somebody, and a body like this one has to get a councilman person to propose that and the council to vote on it, that this is what we want. having data points drifting around in the ether of 14 million is absolutely great. And that's a beautiful comp to put in an appraisal. Without that 14 million as a comp in an appraisal, it's not worth anything. So, and I don't know if anybody individually on this call can get a council person to propose this, but I think that ought to be an objective of everybody, objective of a group, right? That we start at least from that as a base. And I think they've finally started to do it. That what has crawled out is that there's now a parcel map with the usage for each parcel, right? They've yet to now put out a parcel map with the use of each parcel and the exact acreage. They had it back in their bid. They don't have it now, right? I have a request in that they give us a decent detailed parcel summary of what's the use, what's the acreage, and a few things about it. Right? So I didn't ask for an appraisal, but I'm pretty close.
And
They're
Dick,
also in the process of upzoning the area. So, you know, what do you do about that? The appraisal would be more because it'll be zoned to do the stuff they want to do.
That take their parcel diagram with their uses, right? With their streets, right?
Right.
And do an appraisal. Because they have now said what lots are going to have retail, what lots are going to have office, what's medical, what's affordable, and what's market rate.
yeah, and I see where you're going with that, Dick. And Hal, you're making a good point. I just want to, kind of put it out there that what they're showing is all what they term targeted development. It's all hypothetical. They don't have to do anything except for the minimum, and they do that over the course of time, and they have excuses for that. So my argument is that the city is doing all of this infrastructure and getting a very low price back on the value of the land, because we know with the infrastructure, it's a lot more than 174 million. So that's a pretty powerful argument in and of itself, from my perspective.
And we also know it's more than 279. That's the appraisal
to
we're
start
going off
with.
of.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm using what they used in their slide of the 174 million is what they're giving back, because they're paying 105 million for the land, supposedly.
It's just a bad deal. The easiest way to do it would to be get an appraisal as is with the upzoning and sell the whole thing at the front end for that. It's yours. You can do more due diligence to make sure there's no contaminated areas, but once you own it, you own it.
And Hal, can I mention also, I don't mean to hark on the Midtown deal, but I just wanted to, throw it out there so everybody hears this. The way we did it in the term sheet with Midtown is that they had to deliver on phase 1 and phase 2 within a certain time frame, which would then allow them to still be the developer. We could terminate them if they didn't. If they did, then they could go on to phase 3 and phase 4. So in other words, it was performance based. They couldn't buy the whole thing and sit on it and hold it, which is what I think Hines is doing in San Diego. So, I mean, it sounds like San Diego didn't cut a very good deal either. But that's what we're going to be stuck with, is the developer dictating to the city for 30 years.
Yeah, I talked to a commercial realtor friend and I said, something, $105 million is nothing to these people. They could leave that sit and not do anything, just knowing they have control of it, and sometime over the next 30 years, maybe do something with it. That 105 million doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
She disagreed with me. She said, oh, people don't leave, developers don't leave their money just sitting there. They do if it's that little.
Well, in this case, they really have no money sitting there for 12 years.
Yeah.
It's just astounding.
Good point.
I have never seen, in my 45 years, I've never seen a deal this bad. I know I've said that before, but I've just never seen anything like it. I did deals in Louisville, Kentucky, in Durham, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York, and St. Pete, and I've never seen anything like this, guys.
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out if it's corruption or incompetence. I mean,
It definitely has me scratching my head. I know the staff people there, and I know many of them are very talented and smart. So I believe that they were told to get it done, and you know, and that's how we're stuck with this. And I am a little surprised at legal. When I was there, I couldn't get away with anything with legal. I mean, they were tough, and I think legal should explain the risks in the deal better, and not just pass it off to the administration and say, "Oh, it's their problem. It's a business terms, so we don't get involved in that." When I was there, they got involved in everything. And some of that language is so poorly written that I believe that Ray's Hines, their attorneys must have written that language, and the city must have accepted it.
mhm.
So the money that we
Yeah.
paid, all the extra money actually was for their lawyers, is what you're kind of saying?
Well, and you know, Lynn, it's a good point, because I believe that they made a huge mistake. You know, they apparently put all this value on bringing in lawyers, and I get that to a certain extent, but you know, I mean, it comes down to the deal, right? It's business terms. And so who's responsible for not doing the homework that I talked about up front, and not presenting this, you know, with some bumpers? Um, you know, I mean, it's like they threw the golf ball, you know, 10 lanes down, and didn't have any way of bringing it back and containing that the flow of that ball. And now they're stuck with something that just is shocking.
Well, I'm thinking that one of the things we have to do is get the city council to agree that they have to have a new appraisal. There are 4 defects with the current appraisal. Any one of the 4 would really force them to have a new appraisal. The first one is that they are using a present value. They're the parcel in the appraisal says that they're assuming the parcel is sold as one lot. And that's not what's happening. The parcel is being bought over a 30-year period. And so you got a present value versus a future value thing. And you've got to somehow, the appraisal doesn't account for that. The second one is the acreage is wrong. As I was saying, there's the surveyed acres looks like 94.8 acres, and they're talking about 78. The third one is that they aren't using comparables. They're besides the comparable of the old police station. There's 3 other comparables that are recent, and those 3 comparables have a value for a buildable acre of 12 million, 14 million, and 31 million an acre. And the fourth thing is that the original appraisal was based on 2022 zoning, and not the proposed zoning which is high density, high rise, high density zoning. And any one of those 4 should require the appraisal to be redone.
And Peter, is the number 5 is that the original appraisal had assumed the utilities would be added by the developer?
Yes, that could be a 5th one. Yes, absolutely.
Because there goes our whole 130 million.
Yeah. Thank you, Dick.
Mhm.
So please put that there.
All right. Well, that was awesome, Al. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for the discussion afterwards. I learned so much from these meetings. You can't imagine how many pieces of paper I've written on in the last few months from all of this. So thank you again. And we'll see everybody next week, Monday night, 6 o'clock.
Thanks,
Thanks again
everybody.
for coming.
Thanks,
Thank
Lynn.
you, Al.
Thank you.